On today's episode, breaking down a side hustle success story. I'm Jeremy Fisher. This is The Awakening. In the past, we've talked about the difference between generic and specific advice. Generic advice is generally correct and applies to generally everyone, but it often comes in direct conflict with specific advice that might apply to you as an individual. That can make the right advice for you and me tough to find, because how can you really know what generic advice applies to you and what should be thrown out with the trash? Today, I think we should look at a side hustle success story and break down how following generic advice would have kept this idea from ever even happening. Recognizing the lack of fishing-focused communities on Facebook in 2010, Ross Gordon, who's passionate about the sport, created the Bass Fishing Favorites Facebook page. Ross started the group to build a community of bass fishermen, and at the time had no idea that it would lead to the launch of a full-scale business that earns $30 million a year. In its early days, the Bass Fishing Favorites group was among the largest fishing fan pages on Facebook, growing to over 65,000 followers in its first 2 years. Today, over 150,000 followers call it home. That's a good place for you and me to stop and park for a second. This was a side hustle that made zero money for years. You might have heard the generic advice that if your business doesn't make money in the first 12 to 18 months, it's not a business, it's just a hobby. In fact, that's something that Shark Tank star Kevin O'Leary loves to tell people. If it's not making money within a few months, take your idea behind a barn and shoot it, he might say. If Ross Gordon had followed that advice, by the first year he would have abandoned this business and the tens of millions of dollars in sales that he sees now. Okay, back to the story. Gordon initially had no idea what to do with his newfound congregation of anglers. So, while maintaining the fishing page, he founded Craft Jack, a lead-generating company for the home improvement sector that was later acquired by HomeAdvisor. In the interim, he was getting more involved with bass fishing himself, and that led him to identify a business opportunity for his page. We're going to stop right there again. Most generic advice that you get is that you should focus on one side hustle or business at a time. The advice is that there's power in focus, and if you aren't giving one of your side hustles all of your attention, it's never going to grow to anything. In Gordon's case, that wasn't true. He kept building the community on the side, having no idea how it would end up earning an income, and in the meantime spent time on another idea that generated an income. The focus on one thing advice may apply to a lot of people, but not everyone. Okay, back to the story. 2 years in, the Bass Fishing Favorites Facebook page had grown to 65,000 fans, as we've said. And that's when Gordon really started thinking about ways to turn it into an income source. The more I got into bass fishing, the more overwhelmed I became with all the different products on the market, Gordon said. Somebody could simplify this very complicated sport for me by just sending me 2 different lures each month based on what was meant to be used for that time of year. Gordon went looking, but nobody offered that kind of service. So Gordon figured he might as well do it himself. In 2012, he launched Mystery Tackle Box, a fishing-focused monthly subscription box that introduces anglers to a variety of custom-curated lures and tackle. The debut box shipped the following August. The first month, I think we shipped out about 458 boxes, Gordon said. Most of these customers came from the Facebook page. Okay, let's park for a second again right there. 458 boxes from a page that had 65,000 fans. That means that 0.7% of the people who were fans of the Facebook page bought the product. That might sound like a really small number. Imagine coming up with what you believe is a brilliant idea that's targeted exactly at the perfect customer. You've got a very active group of anglers with tens of thousands of members. You might expect that you'd get a quarter or maybe even half of the people following this page to sign up. That's how a lot of people approach these businesses when they think about numbers. But what's far more likely is that you're going to get anywhere from 0.5% to 2% of your followers to engage in anything, no matter how amazing it is. Now, if that discourages you, it shouldn't. 1% is a very common conversion percentage, but the good news is it's often plenty to earn an income from whatever hustle you have, even if you have a smaller list of followers. In Gordon's case, the 458 boxes that he shipped meant his brand new business had just earned under $10,000 in sales for 1 month. And because the service is a monthly subscription, it would lead to over $100,000 in sales for the year, just from the launch. Okay, back to the story. By its second month, Mystery Tackle Box had nearly doubled its subscriber count to around 800. Since subscription businesses have large upfront costs, Gordon would need to build the business to increase his profit margins in order to be able to live off of the Mystery Tackle Box business. So Gordon kept the subscription box on the side while he continued to work for Craft Jack for another 2 years. This is an interesting thing. Right here is where you would get a lot of generic advice that you're seeing great traction. You need to focus on this business 100%, quit your job, whatever you're doing, and focus only on Mystery Tackle Box. Again, that's not what Gordon did. He kept his day job for another 2 years while Mystery Tackle Box grew. It wasn't until 2014, when Gordon was finished with his acquisition engagement with HomeAdvisor, that he was able to go full-time with Mystery Tackle Box. So this is someone who knows how to run a business with a great model that's growing month over month, but it took a total of 4 years from inception to full-time income. 4 years. Now, you see a lot of flashy side hustles and stories online where people grow from 0 to $1 million in what seems like 3 months or even 6 months. But what's far more common, even if it's an amazing business idea that has a huge need, it can often take years to get to a large full-time income. When asked if he initially had any idea how big Mystery Tackle Box would become, Gordon said, "I had no idea. It was literally just something I was passionate about. It was a side project." Although the business is seasonal, with some subscribers pausing their subscriptions during months they don't plan to fish, today the service boasts a peak of 115,000 subscribers. So a business that took 2 years just to make any money, 4 years to make a full-time living, that started off slow with what might seem like low conversions, now earns over $2 million in sales per month. When asked about what advice he would offer to new side hustlers, Gordon said, "Don't think about it, just do it." For some reason, a lot of people are really scared to take the next step. He said, "At the end of the day, your downside risk is however much upfront capital and time you need to invest, but your upside risk is happiness for the rest of your life." Gordon's advice not to think about it and just go do it might actually be the most conflicting to generic advice yet. Generic business advice is to write a business plan, do market research, find out if there's demand for your product, test it before you offer it. But sometimes the right answer is to pursue what you're interested in without any idea of how it can make money, and realize later down the road, the answer will present itself to you. At least that's advice from Ross Gordon. I hope you enjoyed that story. It highlights the fact that, yeah, there's a lot of generic advice out there and generic principles, but a lot of it might not apply to you as an individual. So if you're feeling discouraged because the way you feel about something comes in direct conflict with advice that you've received, you might be right. If you're the type of person who becomes inspired when you hear stories like this, it usually means there's something inside you that wants to get out. Listen to that voice. It's trying to tell you something. And if you are that kind of person, you cannot miss the next episode of this podcast. The next episode is going to be one of the most important episodes I've ever released. It is what you have been waiting for. That's it for today's show. If opportunity doesn't come knocking, let's build a door.